Hello and welcome to the show, auction update for CoreLogic, and as Kevin Brogan will tell us in just a moment, it would appear that Sydney is leading the recovery. All the good news coming away in just a moment.
Standing out affordably in a cluttered media landscape is difficult, but now there is a way using social media, buyer targeting and an engaged audience looking and thirsty for property information. The Property Show is an exclusive offering from realty.com.au that can profile and promote your listing to hundreds of thousands of eager and targeted property buyers and sellers. You'll be surprised at the low cost and enormous benefit of combining new media, social media and audience targeting. So get started by following the link on the homepage at Real Estate Uncut.
Kevin Brogan from CoreLogic joins me. We'll bring up the final clearance rates firstly, but as I mentioned at the intro there, Kevin, Sydney appears to be leading the recovery. Good results out of Sydney and Melbourne, but gee, the auction numbers, as we'll reveal later in the show, still quite strong out of Sydney. But let's have a look at the clearance rates, Kevin.
Yeah, look, Sydney had a fairly solid clearance rate at 63.9%, and as you said, the most auctions of any capital city at 452. Obviously, in more normal times, we see Melbourne with slightly more auctions than Sydney, but obviously Sydney embracing the recovery and the removal of those restrictions. Melbourne had the highest of the clearance rates between Sydney and Melbourne, 65.1%. And auction activity still just a little bit slower to build at 261 auctions for last week.
Adelaide very strong at 57%, and even Canberra at 71%. Canberra leading the pack, of course, as you can see on the screen there. Off a smaller number of auctions, but gee, that's a good result no matter what.
Yeah, look, Canberra's sort of weathered the storm in terms of clearance rates. I mean, all the way through the COVID crisis, the clearance rates were relatively resilient. But you can see the number of auctions well down there, 28 results collected this week. You'd normally expect to see at least double, maybe three times that level of activity. Similar in Adelaide, you might expect in a sort of normal times to have around 100 auctions.
Okay, we'll take you to the auctions for the week ahead. Once again, we can see now that Sydney certainly has the most number of auctions in the country. Melbourne at 143. I don't know about you, Kevin, but I was a little bit disappointed. I thought that Melbourne would have recovered a little bit faster than this.
Yeah, look, I think Melbourne takes its public holidays a lot more seriously than any of the other capital cities, and with the long weekend, that will obviously have an impact in terms of the sort of recovery speed. So look, it's to be expected, with a holiday weekend. So I think the one to look for is the weekend after to see whether the activity and the clearance rates continue to build.
Okay, well, Sydney's 377 auctions, Melbourne 143, Brisbane 42, Adelaide 21, Perth 6, and in Canberra 29. Kevin, we'll come back and we'll review those numbers again before we go. But before we do, an interesting stat coming out and a graph coming out today from CoreLogic that shows the combined capital city sales to listings ratio. And of course, we're at a very low ebb in terms of number of listings and number of sales, but still this is an interesting stat at 1.3. That ratio. What does that actually mean, Kevin, looking at it on the screen now?
Yeah, look, this is the ratio of properties coming to the market, new listings, and properties that are sold. And this is the highest that we've seen for a decade. So it's basically saying for every property that comes to market, 1.3 properties are being sold. I think it's important, as you say, to note that it is coming off a really low base because we had a really significant interruption to the flow of properties coming to market as vendors determined quite reasonably that they were going to defer any decision to list their properties. But I think another part of the context is that the number of properties across the combined capital cities coming to market has increased by 20% over May. So although it's coming off a low base, we're actually seeing quite a significant increase in the number of properties coming to market. And yet on the demand side, we're actually seeing the demand coming back at a faster rate.
We did see a couple of weeks ago, I think, an explosion in the number of listings over 90 days that were not selling or sitting on the market. I'm just wondering if a lot of that stock now has readjusted to the market price, or the sellers have, and we're now seeing that being eaten up. I don't know, is that something we should be aware of, Kevin?
Yeah, look, I think what we are seeing is an improved market confidence. So if we look at the Roy Morgan consumer confidence markets, you'll see that there's been a sort of 50% increase over May from the sort of the depths of that measure in March. And so what you're seeing is that not only vendors were deferring purchasing decisions, but obviously the financial uncertainty experienced by a lot of potential purchasers meant that they were deferring the decision. So as the confidence improves, perhaps those purchasers are actually now in a position to move reasonably quickly if they feel that their confidence has returned and their financial security is better than it was. So look, they are returning to the market, and there'll probably be a fair bit of stock on the market for 90 days, which hasn't really been seriously looked at by purchasers now. So it's not as if it's sort of been there and gone stale. It's just people haven't been looking, and now they can do more inspections and they can participate more actively in the market. They're returning.
Okay, well, just to recap our final auction clearance rates, we'll bring those up on the screen again for you now. Sydney 63.9%, Melbourne 65.1%, Brisbane 38.5%, Adelaide 57.1%, Perth 20%, and Canberra 71.4%, giving us a weighted national average of 61.3%. Kevin Brogan will join me again on Monday, and we'll have a look at the first rush of figures from the weekend's activities. Kevin, look forward to talking to you on Monday. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Speak to you then.